pay attention to what your goals are and what your sort of things that you need to do are and where they land on in terms of priority, because we ADHD people are bad at prioritizing. And it's important to sort of look at, if I don't do this, what are the consequences? Because it's also possible, not just for Daniel, but for other people listening. There's a lot of folks who, like, COVID hit and they were like, I'm going to drop 30 pounds and learn how to pick locks and become a master guitarist. Right. And like
by Friday.
Right. Exactly. And so if some of the stuff you're having trouble doing is like learning to pick locks and becoming a master guitarist, maybe that doesn't matter. And you don't need to beat yourself up about the fact that you're not doing those things, because if you are, it's just going to make the depression side worse. It's going to make it that much harder to do the stuff you do have to do, like pay your taxes and maybe lose 15 of those 30 pounds.
ADHD Rewired, episode 334. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Hey, real quick, I want to thank everyone who reached out to us last week regarding episode 333, race-based trauma, RSD, and ADHD with Ramonza McAllister. There was a little snafu at about 5 minutes in. There was like a minute of silence. As soon as we learned about this, we uploaded the fixed file. So if you haven't listened to that yet and you still want to, if you have your podcast automatically updated on your player, go ahead and delete the one that's on your player and then re-download it, and it should be good with the full version. All right, let's get on with the show. Welcome back to the episode of ADHD Rewired. We are here for our fifth COVID live Q&A, recorded on July 14th. You're hearing this in August, though, if you're hearing this on the podcast. We have a question from Daniel, who I believe was asked a question previously here on our live Q&A. So, Daniel, hopefully your audio will cooperate. What is your question?
So I've been wondering, I've been having trouble with motivation, follow through, and just managing drive to do things that I would like to do. And then, of course, always having problems doing the things that I don't like to do. And I've been wondering, how do you know when it's a product of ADHD or if it's more depression?
It's a good question, and I think it's often situational. As someone who obviously has ADHD and has certainly experienced on and off bouts of depression myself, for me, the ADHD piece is like, I really want to do it. I really want to do it. My engine is revving, but I just can't shift out of neutral to get started. When it's depression, it's more of just like, meh, I don't really care that much about it. Like, it's like a real lack of energy. Sometimes it really feels physically different. Like it almost can be physically painful, that feeling of depression.
Okay. So I guess I tend to have both then, particularly around some things that are really important that I need to get done. Like I have that physical response. But then around things that I would like to do to further my life, it's like I know what to do, but I just can't get myself to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just so frustrating because, I could explain to somebody else how to get it done. Like I could coach somebody else, but I can't do it myself.
Well, welcome to my world. This is why I help other people do the stuff that I will often acknowledge. Here's the thing that when I'm doing it works. I'm currently not doing the thing, but yeah, that's ADHD. Well, what did you want to add to it?
Oh, just, yeah, the same kind of topic about with depression, can you hear the knocking in the background?
I can totally hear the knocking.
Yeah.
Do they have a question? Is it your kid?
No, it's someone else in my building. I've never seen. Oh, now I've lost track. Darn.
You're leaving it in. All right. Depression and Brendan, since you haven't had any vodka, do you want to...
Speaking background noises, there's the biggest fly in the whole world in my office right now. So if you hear buzzing, that's what that is. I can't get it out because the door's shut. My apologies. But I want to play a little bit with the not doing stuff. Pay attention to what your goals are and what your sort of things that you need to do are and where they land in terms of priority, because we ADHD people are bad at prioritizing. And it's important to sort of look at, if I don't do this, what are the consequences? Because it's also possible, not just for Daniel, but for other people listening. There's a lot of folks who COVID hit and they were like, I'm going to drop 30 pounds and learn how to pick locks and become a master guitarist. Right. And by
Friday.
Right. Exactly. And so if some of the stuff you're having trouble doing is learning to pick locks and becoming a master guitarist, maybe that doesn't matter. And you don't need to beat yourself up about the fact that you're not doing those things, because if you are, it's just going to make the depression side worse. It's going to make it that much harder to do the stuff you do have to do, like pay your taxes and maybe lose 15 of those 30 pounds.
If it is between those two options, between locks and guitars, either way you get to pick.
That's a true story. And I am not working on becoming a master guitarist, but I totally have a clear lock upstairs that I'm working on learning how to pick. And my kids have already figured it out, so it won't take that long for me.
All right. So I hope that was helpful. Let's move on to our next question.
Could go with Christina down here.
All right.
She's willing to go live.
All right. Excellent. Let's get Christina up. All right. Christina.
Hello.
Hello. What's your question?
So I'd like to figure out why I'm rebelling every time I make a new routine. So I've been listening to the podcast for a while, all three really. And I've been trying to make new routines and very stubbornly didn't want to, but now I realize they're really helpful and they've been really helpful, but they last about 2 weeks. Some of them got to 4 weeks. And then as soon as they're starting to work really well, something inside me just goes, no, I don't like this anymore. And then I stop.
Define this.
I don't know. It's it feels itchy.
It feels itchy.
I like what the routine is doing and I don't want to stop. But I do anyway.
So, Christina, when you're having that moment of feeling itchy, what's your self-talk?
Oh, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Where are the results? Where are the results? Why doesn't it feel like progress yet?
So is it because it's starting to get boring, or the novelty's worn off?
Sometimes it's because the novelty's worn off, and sometimes it's become exhausting. I guess I assumed that after a while, it would take less and less executive function to do it, because if you put one routine onto the next one and you just link them together, all you have to do is activate the routine and then you just go. And for some of them, it works. But with some of them, I'm still having to do all the executive functions for each step.
So, Christina, when you say it takes a while, what in your mind do you consider a while?
I guess 2 weeks.
When you're in 2 weeks and it refers to when you're looking at routines, you're still in training camp, right? It takes as long as it takes. It took 30 days to form a habit. Bullshit. No, it don't. Here's a weird thing. I've had habits that I've established super quickly, but most ones, especially if I feel any kind of resistance around, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of falling down and restarting. And I think that one of the things, and this is a really important thing to understand around ADHD as a disorder or on emotional self-regulation, is that no matter what we're working on, whether it's a routine or a goal or whatever it is, we have to be able to recognize that there's going to be a point where we're going to have the I don't wannas and we're not going to feel like it. And to be successful, we have to be able to figure out ways to push through that. One of the things I talk about is the importance of having, we have to raise our YQ, not just our IQ, right? But our YQ. So what is the why behind the what? So why is it that we're trying to do this routine? What is it that we are, whether the perceived benefit, that we are hoping to achieve? What is that?
I'll tag in. So the way I like to think about the phenomenon that you're describing is that there's this gap, right? I do a lot with gaps. In this case, there's the new and interesting aspect of this activity, right? This hobby, whatever, structure, routine. It's new and interesting. Yay, I'm going to do it. It's new and interesting. And then it ceases to be new and interesting. It becomes boring. And there's this gap that we have to suffer through before the habit actually becomes a habit. And if you don't suffer through that gap, it's never going to become a habit, because that's where the habit part is pushing back. And it's like, no, I don't want to be a habit. And if we respond to that with like, okay, then don't be a habit, we're not going to establish the habit. And Eric was referencing self-talk earlier, and you're kind of like 50% there. You're sort of putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable on this, where you're going, this seems to be working, but I don't like it. And so the fact that I don't like it is a good enough reason for me to stop doing it. As opposed to, I don't like this, but it's working. So I'm going to continue doing it because it's working. And there might be times when you're not sure if it's working. And if that's the case, like, suffer through a little bit and then see if it actually isn't working. But if it's working and it just isn't fun, kind of, if the working part is worth it, then shift and do it. And I completely put the accent on the wrong syllable.
Yeah, I definitely got that.
People in the chat are like, what did he just say?
My dyslexic self caught that right away.
Another thing to think about is, so you started off saying you get this sort of itch, right? Well, let's sort of pull back from this for a moment, observe that feeling, and be like, can I deal with the itch? Like, what does that mean if I feel this itch, this uncomfortable feeling? Can I tolerate that? Right? Doesn't mean you like it, but is it, I think with a lot of things, when we think about the thing that we're avoiding, like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. Right? But if we kind of pull back and say, if I had to deal with it, could I? I think often the answer is yes.
That makes sense. I'm going to try it.
All right. Awesome. I hope that is helpful, and, keep us updated. Come back for the next Q&A.
Thank you.
All right. Let's pick another one. I wonder if like our Q&As are getting progressively more and more ADHD as COVID goes on.
I just got the fly out of my office. So if that helps, I got one. On behalf of others and for me, why do you recommend an external timer like a kitchen timer versus an app timer?
I can tell you. Will can also tell you. Will's like, I got this one. Go for it, Will.
I pick up my phone. I open it. Oh, I want to do that thing or that thing or that thing. I should be going to my timer, but I'm going to open up this app that tells me that identifies plants, even though I'm in my office and there's no plants here.
I have that same app. It's obnoxious about push notifications.
Oh, I don't let it do it.
I know it's a weird one that's gotten through, but yeah, same thing. I mean, so even just now I went to go pick up my phone, and on the Nextdoor app, I got in my notifications menu was something about an electrician. And I was like, wait, do I need an electrician? Like, so, part of focus is our ability to inhibit distraction. Because we tend to notice everything, it's going to be harder to inhibit distraction. So yeah, that is the main reason why. Now, if you use voice activation, that can be a good sort of workaround, or as Will pointed, since pointing to your watch doesn't really work on a podcast, I'll just let everybody know that he pointed to his Apple Watch.
Yeah, I'm good on a audio medium.
Also, I find that having a timer somewhere, right? Like on the kitchen table, in the bathroom, my kid's having toothbrushing issues, like wherever it is. The fact that it's there and it's like in a unique spot forces me to be more mindful of whatever it is that I'm doing that I'm timing. Whereas having the timer on my phone doesn't. It sort of fades in the background and I'm not as mindful. So that helps too.
All right. That was a good question. Let's do another one.
Tony, who will also go live.
All right. Tony, what is your question?
I think I asked, I've forgotten because it's been a while, but I think I was asking about certain behaviors. Like I have this weird thing where I find it hard to communicate honestly and openly with people that are close to me, because I tend to think I'm going to, like, I second guess myself. And if it's something emotional, the emotions sort of, somebody called it the other day on Twitter, they called it flooding, and they just start ramping up and they start taking over. And then I'm all over the map. And I tend to, instead of talking to that person and opening up and saying what's really on my mind and thinking about what I'm saying, I tend to like go towards destructive behaviors and keep thinking it's okay when it's not. And so I'm trying to find these tools to help me, because I'm recently diagnosed in the last 4 or 5 years. And understanding it now and looking back, I realized that my communication level is at like, yeah, I'm okay. Everything's fine. And it never goes any deeper with that, because if I get involved in a conversation, I tend to lose my train of thought, my focus, what I was thinking about. So I'm looking for tools to help me understand why I do that, why I resort to, I get called out on it, and there's like a lie that goes along with it because I'm, bleh. And it's such an intense feeling when the emotions take over, and I'm trying to find stuff to combat that so I can talk openly with people that I care about. And it's been a challenge. Like it's been rough.
Tony, thank you so much for this question. I think a lot of listeners very much relate to this and experience this. And we're going to dive into answering this question as soon as we come back from a break. We will be right back. The registration kickoff event for ADHD reWired's 22nd season of coaching and accountability groups is just around the corner. Every season, we get a flood of emails saying something like, wait, registration was last week. Can I still sign up? And then every season, we have to give people the disappointing news that, yes, indeed, it is too late, but you can join our interest list for next season. You can avoid sending us one of those emails and getting that disappointing reply by going right now to coachingrewired.com and click on the black button so you get your invitation to our registration events for our fall coaching groups. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you've been intending on joining one of our coaching groups, you can either just try to remember to go to coachingrewired.com, or you can take 1 minute right now and add it to your calendar, or hit pause and take 5 minutes and get it done right now. If you are new to this podcast, I want to welcome you. If you are interested in coaching, go to coachingrewired.com to learn more about our innovative coaching and accountability groups. After 10 weeks, you don't have to be on your own. Members stay connected and engaged in our coaching community with weekly sessions that I lead, adult study halls where you can work with others on Zoom, meditation classes, and a number of other peer-led interest groups.
I decided to join this group because I had tried a number of other coaching groups before, and they were shorter and much less intense, and they were kind of great during the 4 or 6 weeks that they were happening. And then everything kind of disappeared, like sand just fell out. And so I was really nervous about trying this because it was so intense, but it felt like the last chance I had because I felt like I had tried all the other things before, and I got way more out of it than I ever expected. But I think I discovered that knowing that I will have people around me to keep supporting me after the fact, it has been just a game changer in terms of what I've been able to get out of group coaching. Because the emotional support and knowing that these people aren't going to go away, but just also the practical support of like, we need each other, and like building these strategies and knowing that I'll have people around to help me stick to them has been really a different experience for me.
If you're looking for connection, accountability, and structure, and you want to grow, then go to coachingrewired.com and add your name to the invitation list by clicking the black button at coachingrewired.com. Our registration kickoff event is September 3rd at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. This episode dropped on August 11th, so that is just 4 weeks away. And don't wait, because we will close registration once we have about 20 people who have RSVP'd. Registration is by invitation only. Get your invitation, save the dates, are going out this week. Go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. All right, we are back. Tony asked the question, how do I combat the fear of communication with loved ones instead of letting the flood of emotions make me second guess my words and just not communicate? He said that he falls into old destructive habits because it's easier than talking or attempting to. All right, Brendan, it looks like you had some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I not that specific problem, but I've had like communication comfort challenges in the past. And one of the things that really helped me get through it was just telling people that I was having this challenge and I was trying to navigate and confront this particular communication issue. Prior to whatever that conversation is, right? Like one of the things I was trying to get through is hard conversations in general. And so I would say to my wife, like, I want to talk about blah because one, it's important that we talk about it. And two, I have trouble with hard conversations. This is a hard conversation. If I can't have this hard conversation with you, I'll never be able to have a hard conversation with someone who isn't you. Because theoretically, you should be the safest one for me to have a hard conversation with. So something along those lines around, I'm having trouble having like more intimate, vulnerable conversations with people who I care about. So, person that I care about, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of talk about that with you. And just talking about this particular challenge of mine is me trying to confront my challenge with having intimate, vulnerable conversations, because this is one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're seeing kind of go meta. So instead of talking about the issue that's bothering you, you're actually having a planned conversation talking about the challenge about having hard conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, it never understood it, but I'm starting to.
One of the things that I learned about having, for myself anyways, having about hard conversations, was that, in sometimes in personal relationships, there's rarely a time where my brain is quiet. But when there are certain scenarios where I would be in a difficult conversation and it would just sort of like my brain's like language just kind of shut off. And so something that I had learned over the last year or so was that that's actually a trauma response. So I've been doing personal work on that. And a tip that I got from a therapist about a year or so ago was when you feel that happening, just keep words coming out. Like, don't stop talking, even if it comes out as a little bit of a word salad. But to do that in a safe space, you're doing this with people who you feel comfortable with and sharing with them, as Brendan was saying, this struggle that you are experiencing, and that so you can sort of just acknowledge it sort of quickly when it's happening, because if people already had a conversation about it, it'll be easier to call it for what it is. And, don't be afraid to take breaks in a conversation. If something's getting heated, if you're feeling flooded, call a 5 or 10 minute timeout, but then come back to it, or say, you know what, it's getting late. I'm feeling flooded. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Could we return to this tomorrow? But then again, make sure you come back to that conversation.
Okay. That's awesome. Thank you guys. Yeah, I've learned to say, hey, can we put this on pause for a second, or give me a second to get my words together? And sometimes that works and it helps. But sometimes it's still not coming to me. And as much as I want to communicate, it's just not there. Like you said, it's like a word salad. Your brain just turns to mush and you're like, what am I doing? Like, yeah.
Does it differ for you to have a conversation over like email or text message?
It actually is. That's something that I've learned over the last few months, is that it's very easy for me to communicate putting stuff down on paper or words or writing a thing than it is to talk about it. And so, yeah, it's weird. And I'm trying to understand, and I want to, because you want to feel normal. Well, I mean, don't. Yes and no. I mean,
can I play with that for a second?
Please.
If it's easier for you to write things down than it is for you to talk about them, this is the thing my wife and I used to do for a different reason, but it still might be helpful.
Okay.
When she and I were first living together, right before we got married, anytime money and finances came up, I flooded, right? And it was pretty much always her bringing up this conversation, because we avoid conversations that flood us, obviously. Okay. And so one day I said to her, like, look, I know these conversations are important. I know we have to have them. Can you email me in advance when you want to have this conversation and whatever the thing is that we need to talk about, so that I have time to, and this is way before I knew ADHD stuff, but so that I have time to kind of process what it is that you want to talk about, and I can get past my defensive emotions and actually have a meaningful conversation with you. You might find it's beneficial to do that same thing with whoever you want to talk about, but kind of for a different reason, where one, writing it out is going to help you organize and collect your thoughts, right? And two, when you send that email or text message to them in advance and let them know that you're going to like have this plan in place. Don't just randomly send them an email. Hey, I want to talk about this thing. Here's 4 pages, right? We don't do it that way. But letting them know you want to have a hard conversation and sending them an email that's like bullet points, not complicated, not like a huge investment of time for them to read. That way, when they come to the conversation, you know that they are at the same level as you. So if you flood, you don't have to worry as much about like, I'm overwhelming them with information and with my emotions. At least it's just the emotion part that they have to nail down. Mm-hmm. And they probably know that's coming because that maybe was mentioned in the email or something. It might be helpful to use that tendency to be able to write things down in advance and just use it as the beginning of the conversation.
That's actually a great idea, because it'll keep me on track and give me kind of a line to follow. So that's a brilliant idea. I love that.
When I was a principal, I had a woman who would come into my office and spend like the whole day there just rambling about one thing that became 50. And I was like, no, if you want to have a meeting with me, you've got to send me bullet points about what you want to do via email before we meet. And it really shortened that interaction, but it helped her stay on task. And that's why I did it. So you might also find it helps you stay on task too.
Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful idea, because that's one of the other things that happens is that because you get afraid to communicate, there's often things that are important that it's easier to just avoid them, and then they never get talked about or an attempt even made. And then it looks like, you start to look narcissistic or that you don't care. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case. It's just getting over that.
Yeah.
Trying to communicate.
You could even make a frame for this email, right? For yourself to record stuff. And in the frame at the bottom, write down something along the lines of, and this is the stuff that I've been afraid to write down.
You know, Brendan, every single week when I talk to my therapist, during each session, I will start something by saying, so the thing that I have been wanting to not tell you this week is.
Nice.
Right? Because it's like, you acknowledge it as uncomfortable, or using the line that Brene Brown suggests in her book Rising Strong. The story I'm telling myself is right. That's a really powerful one, because it's really disarming, right? And it's saying like, here's what's in my head. Like, this could be something that is just like I'm kind of making up here based on my perceptions and my own story in life, right? So I'm not accusing you of this thing, but here's what I'm seeing it as.
Wow. Those are fantastic suggestions. Thank you all for,
you bet.
Man.
You bet.
And yeah, along with that, it's also because we try to mind read what the other person's doing. And I've discovered I'm really terrible at mind reading what other people are thinking. It almost never goes how my brain, we plan out a conversation in our head. And I think I'm batting 0 on getting how conversations are going to go in my head. But yeah. And just one other idea with people that you frequently have to have these conversations with, it might be good to schedule like a reoccurring thing so that you can start addressing things before you hit crisis, because that's like a lot of the times for us when we let our emotions come out is because we were in crisis and things are just too bad for us to bear. And it's actually more beneficial to our relationships to not wait till that point.
All right. So Richard asked, he doesn't want to go live, but he said, I thought I heard 8 months ago that the ADHD reWired podcast family would grow to 5. You know, families take a while to grow. Do you have a podcast that you'd like to pitch? Let me know. All right. Got that one answered. All right. Sheila asks, do you guys have a suggestion for how to get yourself to turn off the TV or computer at night? Yes, I do.
Eric's got all the recommendations, I'm sure. You must have like 15 ways to do this.
Yeah. So, and this is probably fall into one of those examples of, at least in terms of electronics. I know what to do. Not always doing it though. All right. So, a couple things that have worked, for me is outsource the decision to turn it off by letting that be the first thing you do. If you're watching TV, your TV most likely is equipped with an auto off timer, right? So 60 minutes, whatever you want to watch it. You do that. So at least, can you turn it back on? Of course, but it creates a barrier. So you might want it to, you set the timer and then actually go put your remote in another room. So it's actually even harder. Or you get one of those kitchen safe timers, which is one of those big pasta jars that has a timed lock on top. They're wonderful. You can use a lamp timer, to shut off a device. You can also do that to the internet. I've been trying to figure out what do hotels do, because you can never get a good internet connection in a hotel. So how do we do that inside our house on a schedule? That would be great. Any other additions to add?
One thing you talked about earlier was for routines is really checking in with your YQ. Knowing that I'm the one that's going to get up with my kids makes it a lot easier to get to bed on time, because I don't want to be that's in line with my values of I want to be, there for my kids. And that's especially important in the morning when they're grumpy. I don't want to be yelling at them. So that means I need to get up to bed on time. So it makes it a whole lot easier to turn the TV off when I'm ooh, it's getting to that time.
Yeah. And also one of the things that helps me do it is loving future me. Right. And my time horizon affects this, right? So I'm really good at loving tomorrow me. I suck at loving a month from now me, because he doesn't exist. Right. But tomorrow me still exists, which is kind of that sort of weight loss versus go to bed kind of stuff. Right. And if I think of it that way, and there's sort of two ways, right? I'm either no, I love future me enough to go to bed now because I want to be able to perform at whatever level tomorrow. Or I sometimes have to flip it a little more negative and be this is going to be, it's going to be so hard for me to do X if I don't go to bed now. One of those two typically works fairly well.
It's a challenge. It's has been, people who have been listening to this podcast for a while have heard me talk about my challenges with getting to bed, on time. 'Cause even though I intellectually know that tomorrow's Eric is going to be really grateful if I get my ass to bed, the emotional part doesn't register. And it's really frustrating because I really know. But
that's why sometimes I have to flip it to the negative and be tomorrow Brendan is going to be so cranky. And that sometimes feels more real.
Yeah, it's, I still haven't kind of figured out what I make 2 steps forward or 1 step back with my sleep. And that's kind of just been my journey with sleep. It's not something that I have yet mastered, but man, when I do, watch out, world, because my brain will be a much better place. All right. We have a really good question from Victor. What are the chances that a person has been misdiagnosed with ADHD when in fact they have complex PTSD? Could complex PTSD symptoms look like adult ADHD? Ooh, okay. So, yes, the chances of misdiagnosis, there are lots of things that can look like ADHD, PTSD being one of them. There was a study that came out a year and a half ago that basically asked the question, is it ADHD or PTSD? The answer is yes. Right. And it's often a sort of a dance between the two. Right. So there's the ADHD, which then could create the PTSD based on how people are responding. I'll tell you, I've been doing some work through understanding complex PTSD or CPTSD. Over the last several years, it was always one of those things. Anytime something were to come up about it and anything I was reading, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I should probably learn more about that because that seems significant. And then, that's about as far as it went. And then, or just earlier this year, I started digging in a lot deeper to that. And this is my own sort of theory. So this is not something that has a strong, evidence behind it. But I think that there is a huge high correlation in the ADHD community with CPTSD. I think it's the more I understand and learn about it, the more I see it more often than not. I know that, what's his name? Gabriel Mate. He has a book on, adult ADHD, and he talks a lot about how, he thinks that a lot of it is more PTSD or complex PTSD. And one of the interesting things about, complex PTSD when it comes to, and this kind of connects back to the question about communication and flooding, is that flashbacks are not sort of these visual experiences that we often think about around like PTSD, at least how it's portrayed in movies, how people are sort of familiar with, but are more of an emotional response to something where something sort of just hits you real hard, or you feel a sense of overwhelm or dread or shame, like being triggered by something. And that's often a CPTSD, a complex PTSD, response. So, I know that there's a growing number of books on this topic. And I think that it's going to be an interesting space to watch over the next 5 years, in the ADHD space, especially with adults. So, Brandon, do you have anything to add to that?
This is why the wall of awful is a trauma model.
Yeah.
That's why, because that's what it is. That's what I'm getting at with the wall of awful is it's the emotional consequence of ADHD. And also not just like I didn't do my homework, like that's where it starts, right? But there's a lot of other things that go into it. And the complexity of it is ADHD is a hereditary disorder. So depending on how severe the ADHD is affecting your family, you could be growing up in a really chaotic home. And that's going to be affecting traumatically your ADHD and your development and all of that stuff too. So the executive functioning challenges that go with ADHD don't begin and end with the person who has it, right? Like they also affect that person through their family experience. Epigenetically, just experientially, and then passed on to the kids. And I mean, the parent coaching groups yesterday, we were talking about the systems and structures. We were just doing a check-in on how those things were going. And so many of the parents said, I'm where the system breaks down. I'm the problem with why this isn't happening. And on the one hand, that's some good personal insight. And on the other hand, that's a really heavy, emotional, potentially traumatic weight to bear. And you don't need to take it all on yourself. You can share it. You can just accept that like the thing that system isn't working. And that's kind of my job, is to help people be like, pump the brakes on the guilt and the shame. Like maybe we just approach this from a new angle. But yeah, the complex trauma with ADHD it's intrinsic to the disorder, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. And it's an area that I'm continuing to dig into more, because it's really relevant. All right. Let's pull up Pat. Pat has a question about tactics, inspirations, or war stories related to being a new dad who doesn't sit very well. But before we answer Pat's question, let's just take one more quick break, and we will be right back. Hey, this week on Hacking Your ADHD, Will Curb has a very special guest. It is Brendan Mahan from ADHD Essentials, and they are going to be talking about the wall of awful. Join Will as he explores ways that you can work with your ADHD brain to do more of the things that you want to do. Subscribe to these short, mindful ways to hack your ADHD. Go to hackingYourADHD.com for show notes and to subscribe. And every Friday, check out ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan. At ADHD Essentials, they help families develop the skills and knowledge needed to better manage ADHD. Go to ADHD Essentials to learn more. Both Hacking Your ADHD and ADHD Essentials are both part of the ADHD reWired podcast network, available to everyone, everywhere you consume podcasts. Join me and the host of Hacking Your ADHD, Will Curb, and ADHD Essentials, Brendan Mahan, for an hour of live Q&A. And guess what? That's today. We're doing it at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Go to ADHDrewired.com/events to register for this and upcoming live Q&As. Join us every second Tuesday of the month, same day, same time. It's 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern for an hour of live Q&A. Register for free at ADHDrewired.com/events. If you are listening to this today, the day it came out, hurry on over to the website if you're catching this early enough and join us. That's ADHDrewired.com/events. We'll see you there. This podcast is brought to you by our patrons over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. I appreciate everybody who can financially support this podcast. And I want to welcome Carrie and Catherine G, who gave at the $10 a month level. Thank you so much. Consider giving at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon, or just click the Patreon tab at the top of the page. I really do appreciate everyone's support. And if you are able to support this podcast financially, I sincerely thank you. And for those of you who have been giving at the $25 a month level, our next group coaching call is Tuesday, August 25th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. If you want to support this podcast but can't do so financially, what you can do is leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player, or share it in your online communities. All of your support is appreciated. To become a patron, go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. We have perks starting at $5 a month, so go check it out. Patreon is Patreon, or just go to ADHDrewired.com and click on the Patreon tab at the top of the page. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. All right, we are back. Pat, well, first of all, congratulations on being a new dad.
Thank you.
How's it going?
It's been great so far. We are 3 months and a week in, and continuing to learn and basically have different challenges and different kind of things to learn about and figure out every few weeks.
All right. So the challenge that you are having, or you have a question about, is what? Is just like how to sit still with your baby?
Yeah. I've chosen to work part-time to be able to support my wife, support our family, and spend that time. And what I'm finding is I am often the one who, when I step away from work stuff and, I have a half day, I'm the one, like, first thing to do is like, I'll sit still and be like, you're good. Okay. Everything's fine. And I'll go in and clean up the kitchen. Or I was running a lot more laundry when we first had our daughter than I ever had in my life. But found myself doing a lot of the small little fill-it-in jobs and kind of wondering if that's just to keep myself busy and how much of that is just my nature and I've got to be accepting of that, and how much is it worth working to try to adjust that so that I can just sit still and enjoy these moments and kind of stay with that purpose that I had set.
I'm going to let Will start with this one.
Yeah. Well, so part of what's going on here too is that you have this view in your head of how you're supposed to be a dad. And you have this like, my kid is so important that I'm able to focus on them, even when they're just being so incredibly boring, which is a lot of time with kids. Like, it's not like, especially with babies, they're just lying there and you can only spend so much time just staring at a lying baby before your brain goes, I need to go do something else. Like even yesterday, I was playing ball with my son in the yard and it was okay for a bit. And then I'm like, well, how can we change up this game to be a little bit more fun? Because you can't catch yet. And this is just me like throwing a ball kind of near you because I don't want to nail you in the head every time. And it's like, okay, so we'll...
Notice he said every time. So he's okay doing it sometimes.
That's how he changed the game up.
Yeah, it's hilarious because it like bounces off his head and he laughs. And but yeah, it's a lot of being like, okay, I need to change my view of how I'm interacting with my kids. This is not TV or movies where I'm just a different person because I'm a dad. When I'm a dad, I'm still Will with ADHD. And so being like, okay, how can I make it so that I'm enjoying my time with my kids? When my son was very little, I used to like have him in a baby carrier and I'd, like walk around and do stuff with him then. And so, yeah, it's more about trying to find ways that are actually interesting to be with your kid rather than just being like, I'm a failed parent because kids aren't that interesting to play with all the time. Like, play Candyland sometime. It's a terrible game.
Brendan?
It doesn't matter what they think, right? Like, as parents, we live in this fear of them, and they're going to see how we're parenting and find us wanting and like judge us and blah, 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 blah. And they don't exist. And all of us are living in fear of that. And it's dumb because you're not doing it wrong. You're doing it right. Like, the laundry needs to get done. And as long as your kid is safe and like not going to, I don't know, roll off the table and break their arm, go do the laundry. Right. And factor into all of this, it sounds like you're puttering more than you feel like you should be puttering. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary.
So I would, the only part of that I would wonder about is it anxious puttering or is it like ADHD puttering, right? Because there's a line there. And yes, ADHD puttering is fueled by anxiety, and I recognize that. But you are a new dad, and there's anxiety that comes with being a new parent, and that's totally normal and totally okay. You're also a new parent during a global pandemic. I haven't said that yet during this Q&A. And
I was waiting for it.
We are living through an international traumatic event. So that is also factoring into your experience as a new dad, and there's may very well be some anxiety from that. So if you're sort of puttering to burn off some anxiety, that's also okay. Only if you feel like you're burning anxiety in a way that's toxic and negative and hurting you or hurting your son or your daughter or hurting your spouse, wife, husband, whoever it is, then maybe we want to start being concerned about it. But otherwise, if you're just like doing more laundry than you usually do, but also hugging your kid and feeding your kid, then you're probably okay.
All right. I think that covers it pretty well to ask it that way. And I think it fits the anxious puttering when it's like, okay, things have been challenging either with the kid or with other stuff. I just I can't look at a messy counter full of dishes anymore. I can't go past it and walk past the kitchen a fifth time with those dishes there. So I'm going to go in and spend 15 minutes on that. So I think that fits with the anxiety and kind of like trying to exert some level of chaos reduction.
Yeah. And control too, right? We're living through a time when we don't have a lot of control. And then you had a baby, so you have less control because babies are like, I'm going to poop and pee when I want. And so like there's some measure of that as well.
Definitely. They're the boss and we run by her schedule.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that Brendan, I know you've said things about this before, just the whole idea of how harshly as parents we tend to judge what we are doing. And if we really take a step back from it, I think that most of us are doing an extremely good job of being parents. I think the difference is we know in our head what else we could be doing, right? But like, just because we're not, 100% attentive to our kid all the time doesn't mean that we're being a bad parent by any means. And it's something that I wrestle with too, right? It's, like Will, when you're describing the boredom of playing the game, oh my, like all the time, like, and if, and my son, being on the spectrum, and there's certain things that he likes the game to have the rules that he wants them to. He basically wants me to be like the puppet, and he's the puppeteer. And it like, I can't do it. And sometimes I tell him that. Sometimes I'll just tell him like, I'm like, we got to add another element to this game because my brain wants to just fall asleep right now. I can't do this. And that's part of like my relationship with my son. He's 9, I'm talking about the things that we do and don't do and what's hard. But Pat, your little one is 3 months old, and I'm sure you've had a lot of people tell you this, but this time will go by so fast. And that notion that the days are long, but the years are short. True stories right there. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. And she's young enough that like every now and then, if you're full of anxiety, just smell her head. It will relax you.
And there she is, the guest of honor.
Occasions, yeah.
See, she's cheering me on. She's like, yeah, Dad, come smell my head.
All right, Pat. Well, thank you. And congratulations again.
Thank you all.
All right. I think we got time for 1 or 2 more questions here. Do we got one picked out?
We could go with Stephanie, who will go live.
All right, Stephanie.
Hi. Hello.
What is your question?
So I'm just wondering how I can hold myself accountable when I'm working on a large multi-step personal project. I'm working on writing a book right now. I've actually been working on it for 5 years, but it has such an esoteric sort of, step-by-step thing, like write chapter 1, write chapter 2. And so I'm wondering, how do I go about doing that?
Okay. So, I think when you ask, how do I hold myself accountable? To me, when you have ADHD, it's sort of a false question, right? You don't. You leverage other people to help you be accountable. I think that our brains just don't, so non-ADHD people will say, oh, I'll put it on my calendar and that will hold me accountable. And I'm just like, how the hell does that even work? Like, what? That doesn't make sense, right? Like, I know for accountability it's not somebody that's going to make you do something. It's someone who's going to ask you to report back on something you said you want to do. Right.
Okay.
And so if you do it, great. Hopefully that person will then ask, how'd you get it done? And same thing too, if you don't do the thing. All right. Like, what happened? Are there strategies or things that we can kind of talk about to figure out what might be more helpful? In my coaching groups, we talk about compassionate ass kicking as how we sort of like model accountability, right? Because like we get it, and I think it's important to work when you need accountability for a self-managed project with people who get it. Otherwise, it can be so easy to get shamed. And then you're like, fuck accountability. I don't want any of that, right? That just makes me feel bad, right? But when you're working with people who understand it, you have the compassion there, but then you also need the ass kicking. So it's not just like, yeah, I have those goals too that I don't do every single day and still think about it, right? So it's like still holding their feet to the fire while giving you a hug.
Yeah, I like that.
Anything you want to add to that, either Brendan or Will?
I might add for like, especially with like writing things, like make the to-do list and the steps less esoteric. Be like, because write chapter 1 is a project in itself. Break that down. I'm going to write 500 words today, or 1,000 words today. I'm going to edit this section, so that it's very clear what those goals are.
And what if you even had a goal like? So what time do you typically start working on your writing?
I try to work on it in the morning because my brain is a little bit better, and I can set up the TV for my kids, so I get a whole hour by myself.
Ooh, a whole hour. Okay.
I know.
So let me ask you this. So if you write one paragraph, what is the chances or the likelihood that you will write 2 more pages?
Probably really high.
Okay. So what if you set a goal, something like between 9 and 9:15, I will write 1 paragraph. And that is your goal, right? And you're really focusing on that, because if you do that, that then becomes the domino that makes it easier to write pages versus just a couple paragraphs.
Yeah, I like that. It sounds a lot shorter and doable, and something that I could definitely reach for and accomplish.
Yeah, I think
feel good about
for bigger goals like that, break it down until it just seems like ridiculously easy. It can literally be to sit down in front of your computer. That's the goal.
Okay.
Brendan, anything to add?
Take accountability. I want you to put it in a blender with bragging or celebrating or credit or whatever, right? Because I'm gonna reveal a deep, dark secret that I have.
Okay, I'm listening.
Accountability doesn't work for me.
Same.
Not even a little bit. It's not a thing. It does not do squat for me.
Really?
It doesn't push me.
Wait a minute. I'm gonna challenge you, Brendan, on this.
Here's what it does. Here's what does push me beyond my limits. Being able to brag about all the cool shit that I did.
That's true.
That's what pushes me beyond my limits. If I could be like, I did this super cool thing, now all of a sudden I'm going to go do a super cool thing. Accountability will help me maintain my average. It won't push me beyond my average. So, yeah, you're welcome, Eric. Yeah. So blend. I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks. So blend into the accountability with whoever you're being accountable with, or someone else entirely. Find a bragging buddy. Find somebody that you can just be like, this is why I'm ridiculously amazing, who won't take it personally as a slight on them, who won't see it as you being full of yourself, who will just be like, goddamn right, you're amazing. Me too. I did this. And the two of you can just brag all day long about all the cool stuff you've done, because that's how you get 2 chapters written.
It sounds like you need a wall of awesome.
I need a wave of awesome. It's part of the thing. It's a deal.
Really?
I like it.
The wave of awesome crashes over the wall of awful.
So Brandon, my one sort of thought about how you said accountability doesn't work for you. You release a weekly podcast.
So accountability, buddies don't work for me.
Okay.
Like an accountability. That's what how I was thinking it. Like an accountability partner person doesn't work for me. It doesn't do it. It adds just the right level of pressure for me to not want to do the thing that I would have otherwise done, or it keeps me at my average.
What about, do you have anyone, Stephanie, who you can hop on Zoom with and just work together? We're not actually interacting. We do what's called Adult Study Hall in our coaching groups in our alumni community, where people are on Zoom just working on stuff just like what you're doing.
I do actually. I do have a couple people that I do write with on Zoom. I have not been very good at showing up lately, so
that doesn't mean you can't go back.
It's true. It's true.
Well, and another option there is things like FocusMate, which you can just schedule in advance. And it's I'm going to let someone else down if I don't show up, which can also that's also a very intense form of accountability where you're like, I'm actually letting someone down if I don't do this.
I'm very much an obliger, so that totally sits with me.
Stephanie, if you're an obliger, get yourself some accountability. Obligers are great with accountability.
Yeah, my husband is an upholder, but he's very neurotypical, so he doesn't understand a lot of my, because he's just just do it. And I'm like, that's not how it works.
Thanks. I wish I would have thought of that.
I totally didn't put that on my list.
All right. I think we have time for maybe one more question here. Thank you, Stephanie, for that. Do we have a good one that we can maybe close this out with?
Kendra's willing to go live.
All right, Kendra, what is your question?
First of all, I love you guys. You guys are so darn cute. Oh my God. Okay. Second of all, I'm just distracted all the freaking time. It's like my list. I can't stay on my list. It's like I'm a jack of all trades, a master of none, and I want to be the freaking master of one damn thing. Okay. And look, I'm gonna try to do this quick. So I know you guys are closing. And I'm around some ballers. Okay. So I am sporadic, I'm kind of hype, and I got to watch myself as I'm older. I see myself hitting people like, oh my gosh, calm your ass down. Just calm down. So bottom line with me, clutter. I just can't stick to a list. I just get distracted, but I am a joyful person, but I just get distracted. So I'm not finishing shit. But what's funny, I love accountability. Leah, you're too cute. I love you, girl. You got a friend. You do got a friend. But I have so many accountability partners. I'm not focusing on one damn accountability partner, but I freaking love them. And they are but they're in different sections, business, personal, this and that. So I have about four. Yeah, that I try to, but I don't tell them everything. So
I'm hearing a couple of different things. One I heard initially around clutter. Another is around finishing things.
Yes, sir.
I heard some stuff around maybe some emotional self-regulation.
Yeah.
So you said you have too much on your plate?
Yeah, shit. I messed up registering for you guys, the group. I was like, oh, I'm making it on time. And damn it, I didn't even register right. I'm like, I missed out on the damn group. I need the group now. I kid you not. It's like, I got to slow down,
Well, I think that when you're trying, one of when life is a circus and you're a clown and you are juggling, but you're having a hard time juggle less things. Right. So the first thing to really look at is what can I stop doing? Right. I know for me, like when I'm getting overwhelmed more quickly, or if I'm just having a hard time activating, or stuff that usually kind of like I get excited about, I'm just kind of like, I got to do the thing. Like it's usually I have too much on my plate. Like those are the signs for me that I have too much on my plate. And so I have to start looking at, all right, so first I got to stop the bleeding by not taking on any new commitments. Right. It's because like when for a lot of us with ADHD, like we love new things. It's like it's our brain candy, right? Except that, then we have too much brain candy, then we get brain cavities.
Okay. Yes. Oh man.
Right. So look, and when we are taking things off our plate, we can't just like take the plate and like throw the food we don't want under the bed, because you'll get like mice and rodents and bugs. Right. But what you got to do is look at, all right, what's the first step for actually getting this off my plate? Like, who do I need to communicate with it that I've just made this decision that I'm going to be stepping away from this project or this task? Where can you put cues or reminders to yourself to say no when new opportunities come up?
Yes.
Yeah. A not to do list is a great thing here. Being like, for this year, I will not sign up for any online classes. So on my not to do list, I've been tempted many times. I'm like, that looks like a cool class. Wait, I'm not doing that this year.
Well, I'm willing, Leah, and it was another lady that asked, about Zooming. We can Zoom if you guys want to do a little accountability, you guys. I put my email in here. We can do that. So I forgot the young lady that just asked me, but, Tara, I think it was, but thank you. I like that, you guys. And the timer, I've heard you, Eric. I saw you years ago, and you talked about this timer.
Yeah.
So what is the name?
Are you talking about the time timer? The one that I have behind me that I did not actually set today, even though I thought about it like 9 times during the Q&A. I was like, oh, I didn't set the timer. I should probably do that. I have ADHD. So I'm moving the dial here.
Okay.
All right. And so now it's set and it will start now. So it's the red dial. It's now half of the pie, and now it will just start counting backwards until the pie disappears.
Oh, that's what that was. Okay.
Right.
And you guys spoke about an app, because a couple of us was asking, what's the name of the app?
I typically like analog timers versus apps for timers. Just because we're talking about earlier on this Q&A that like you open your phone and there's everything else that's on your phone on that timer. So the time timer is good for sort of seeing the passage of time, especially if you have to stop at a certain time. But also using a stopwatch that starts at 0 can also help you learn how long things take, which is also, I think, vitally important. I think one of the things that happens is we don't know how long things take. So we say, yeah, we can do that. And we want, so we're learning these to-do list strategies and these calendar strategies. And in theory, they would all work if you actually knew how long the things really were that you're putting on your to-do list and your calendar.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Well, I hope this was helpful. Brian, do you want to add something to that real quick?
Yeah, a couple of things real quick. One, start making a to-done list for at least a little while.
Okay.
It will help you with this perspective. Here's how a to-done list works.
Okay.
At the end of the day, write down 5 things that you did during the course of the day.
Okay.
And then write down 3 things that you need to do tomorrow.
Okay.
You're always in the black because you're always writing down 5 things you did versus 3 things you have to do. So it's not like I have to do 100 things. You're only allowed to write down 3. That's it. Right? So you have to pick the most important 3. This will help you start seeing all of the things that you're actually doing and help you change that internal dialogue of I'm not doing enough. I can't finish anything. I'm not actually accomplishing anything because you're writing down 5 things every day that you actually did. That will help. And then maybe they get more significant. I don't know. You might already be doing significant stuff. And you might also see that like today I did these 5 ridiculously incredible things. Why do I feel like I didn't do enough? I did 5 ridiculously incredible things. That might happen too. And then the other part is gone. So never mind.
I saw that happen on your face. That was amazing.
It's gone.
Like I just saw it. Like I wasn't sure if it was like you were shifting to this really new idea, or it was like, where did the idea go?
It vanished. Yeah,
it's gone. So I think this. Will, do you have anything to add to this one?
I think the idea of also just taking on less stuff and being very protective of your no or of your yes.
That's what it was.
Oh, yes.
Back. All right. So every time you say yes to something, you say no to everything else. So if you're not comfortable saying not comfortable saying no, just recognize that every time you say yes, you're saying no to everything else and get over your lack of comfort with no. Because right now I am not napping or hanging out with my wife or playing with my kids or working with a client or doing anything else. Like I'm doing this instead of those things. So I said no to everything else in order to say yes to this.
But Kendra, do you tend to procrastinate on things?
Okay, I'm done with you. You know that, right? Why you call my ass out, okay?
Here's what I want you to. I want you to put something off. All right. So starting now, here's what I want you to start putting off. When someone asks you if you can do something, I want you to tell them, "Let me get back to you." Have your default be either "Let me get back to you" or "No, I can't do it," and then check your calendar. And if it turns out that it's something you realistically want to do, because it's just something that would work for you, right? Then get back to the person and say, you know what? I just was able to clear something off my calendar that I didn't think I'd be able to do this. I now can. So if by default your go-to is no, and then it's sort of like, it's instead of like opting out, you have to opt in to the commitment.
Yes.
Right. So,
that's the shit right there. Thank you.
Let the yes procrastinate.
I'm dropping in the chat
Okay.
a link to an episode of the ADHD Essentials podcast that I did with Renee Brooks called Guarding Your Yes.
Did you say Brene?
Yeah. Renee Brooks.
Renee Brooks. Okay.
Renee Brooks, RENE. And it's Guarding Your Yes. It's all about.
Thank you.
Yeah, she has the blog, Black Girl Lost Keys.
Yep.
Real good.
And she has a entire workbook on guarding your yes. So
awesome.
Thank you. I love it. That's what I needed to hear.
All right.
That's right there. That was it. Because I do it every time. It's like, why did I commit to something? Girl, I'll call you back in a week, or I'll do this tomorrow. I'll do this. And it's like, no more. Thank you, you guys.
Just click that link before we sign off, because it's going to go poof as soon as the podcast ends, and we're ending soon.
Yes, and I'm trying to get back to you and look at you again, because I did click on it.
Well, thank you, Kendra, and thank you, everybody who submitted questions. I know that we didn't have time to get to everybody's question. I could stick around for a few and answer a couple more of these, but we want it on the podcast. And we'll upload the recording for those of you who are listening to this on the podcast. We'll upload the other questions that I'm going to answer onto our Patreon page. So you can become a patron. We'll upload this for people at the $5 a month level at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And we will catch all of you next month. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHDrewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at my website, ADHDrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You know, you might be the person that turns somebody on to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus yet, check out Brene Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability, and if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brene still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brene, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at ADHDrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.